And then I found out I was pregnant with twins, and I got really sick. I was on bed rest. The structure, all of that stuff, like all of it just got tossed out the window because there was not, like, we just couldn't do it. Practically, we couldn't do it. And so there was this sort of cosmic revelatory space for me to quite literally be stuck in my bed and watching my children. Wow. And I was watching the children learn on their own, in their own time, in their own space, in their own way. And it was completely different from the initial idea that I had about how they needed to learn and how they were supposed to learn. And as I was growing my sons in my womb, I was watching my daughters develop their own interest in certain kinds of books, certain types of toys, certain things on television, certain behaviors I was watching come out, certain interests. And so I just had the time. I was forced to take the time to sit still and watch them. And then from that space, I began to understand and really be astonished because I was feeling really low. Like, oh my God, I'm not able to devote this time every day the way that I intended to do it, in the way that I intended to do it. Mm-hmm. Are they learning anything? Because I'm not teaching them. I'm not able to teach them. But then it was like, hey, look, they are learning on their own. They are acquiring language. They are learning to navigate like difficult circumstances. They are in conversation and in the living. Look at how much they're learning. And that really was an opportunity in those months for almost the entire pregnancy with my twin boys. I was just watching my girls.
Fear of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves, owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning, liberatory practices,
defining love for ourselves and giving our love to as much of the world as it can possibly contain.
Let's find each other. Let's support each other. All of these stories are important and should be shared.
Greetings, bless up. Welcome to episode 40. Pretty special. I also get to enjoy my 40th episode later this year when my solar return sends me into my 40th rotation. I tell you no, I have a kindred spirit panda episode there, God no. Okay, that was your Jamaican patois lesson for the week. What did I just say? I said, I tell you no, I have a kindred spirit panda episode there, God no. Translation, I'm telling you, I have a kindred spirit on this episode, like word. Yolonda Jones, creative spirit, writer, professional photographer, professional natural hairstylist, professional singer, professional black girl, as Dr. Yaba Blay would say. Yolonda's crown rises high like her ambitions and her intentions. She and her partner, her husband Will, are raising 4 free people, 2 daughters and twin sons, while simultaneously raising themselves as creatives, as business owners, as people who are willing to embrace their flaws and their fire. Yolonda and Will have a blog called The Real Life Joneses, recently launched, where they risk expression about life in and beyond the brokenness. And it's just beautiful. I've read the post so far. Y'all, they're talking about PTSD. They're talking about depression, infidelity, creative brilliance, all of it. So if you want in on that, you need to get over to the show notes page after you listen to this episode and click on them links, shawty. AkilaSRichards.com/40. All right. Speaking of clicking on links, let me give a huge shout out to my latest patron, also named Yolanda. Ironically, not the same one that's on the show. Yolanda, thank you so much for your support. I sent you a copy of my #1 best-selling Amazon ebook on unschooling. Email me if you didn't receive that. I appreciate you. Also, Genia, another patron who asked me to go deeper into why raising free people can't be about education reform because we can't fix the system because the shit ain't broken. All right. She said that she hears me saying that, right? As she's going through that process, dealing with her son, being an advocate for her son who has certain disabilities. I want you to know, Genia, that I remember your question and I will for sure let you know when I'm going to offer that up for you, okay? Now, if you want to support this show like Genia did and Yolonda did and my, 16 other patrons, hey, thank y'all. If you want to support this show and the work of offering up diverse narratives and sharing the unique needs of Black and brown folks in self-directed education, go to any of the show notes pages and click the Patreon link at the end of that page, or you can simply go to akilasrichards.com/podcast and click the Patreon link there. Thank ya. All right. Today, Yolonda Jones, who is also one of my favorite Instagram peeps. I'm going to put that link on the show notes page as well. Y'all need to see her videos of her dancing with her babies. Oh my gosh. Just magical. Anywho, Yolonda is sharing her insights on this episode on the work of not trying to fit ourselves and our creative pursuits into one box and how that influences our approach to parenting. Consciously deciding on how our liberation might look and making room for that in our children's lives too. We speak the same language, Yolonda. We talked about the power of observation as an active part of raising free people, both as a way of facilitating and protecting children's freedom, watching them, asking questions, seeking to gain understanding, right? Not trying to mold them into a certain set of grooves. So we talk about all of that, and I can't wait for you to hear her self-directed education story. You heard a little bit of it at the beginning at that teaser, and we're going to go deeper into that. And let me tell you, in this episode, Yolonda is giving you straight up what to do, what not to do as you endeavor to raise free people. So let's get it. Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for making time for me. I know how it is, and you have many, many babies. So thank you so much, Yolonda, for making time.
I really appreciate the invitation. And yes, you're so right. Thank you so much for understanding. That helps me as well.
Yes. So, yeah. One of the things that I love about social media, as I say all the time, is that it's a beautiful connector of tribes. Like you just find your tribeswomen and your tribesmen. And Yolonda and I come from either the same tribe or neighboring tribes.
That's right. That's right.
Yes, because we met online. I want to say it was maybe through Instagram or Facebook. And there's just been very much an instant synergy in the way that we flow, the things that we believe, how we get down in our households.
Yes, I'm so pleased to be here. So pleased. It's good.
Who is Yolonda Jones and what's good in your world right now?
So the best way I know to sum up myself is, firstly, I'm a creative spirit. And I feel like that is like the thing that drives and moves me, like moving through the world. My various expressions in this lifetime end up being very creative, very deep, very emotional sort of manifestations. And so whether that be through my photography, through my writing, through mothering my children, through cultivating natural hair and styling, that ends up being like the true, or music. Oh, I forgot about music. All those things end up being very true expressions to me. So I work as a creative professional. I've been able to monetize many of the things that I just listed, thankfully. And so that's what I do, just trying to be me and make it work.
I love it. I love it. And I know that's going to be so familiar to so many of us because there is, of course, how we're groomed is to pick one thing. You know, we're supposed to decide on one thing that we are. And one of the reasons that it's so important to me to share our stories in particular, we'll find that it's actually very common that as we work on our own freedom, our own liberation, a big part of that is embracing the multitudinous, right? The dynamic way that we are and the way that we don't fit into one box, or we might fit into one box for a little bit and then we're over in another box. And that all of that is perfectly fucking gorgeous because all of that comprise who and how we are. So many of us are afraid of that, you know?
Thank you for affirming that. It's true. I mean, I know that for a very long time I struggled because I just I could not fit. Like I could not choose. It's just like, I can't. I just don't feel any peace at all with trying to pick one. And then it made me miserable because I felt that I had to. Like there was this expectation, this societal, everything you just said, the societal norm that I saw was, you pick one career, you stick to that thing, you devote all of your time and energy to it, and that's how you do life.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't do that, I wasn't happy doing that. I just had to give myself freedom. I had to just say, yeah, it's okay. And it's great whenever you can run into folks who affirm that for you.
Absolutely. I think that's a beautiful and very natural segue into a big part of why we parent the way that we parent. And so what I love about your journey in particular, Yolonda, I think that you're constantly deschooling yourself, and embracing more and more of your own natural grain, yourself first, and then also in your partnership, and then, in your parenting partnerships as well, all of the different ways that you serve and give and get love in the world. And I think that because we recognize that we spend so much time trying to fit and then feeling that it's not okay that we don't fit, that's such a big influencer for why we choose to raise our children in such a way that we hope that they don't have to go through that thing of trying to figure out why they can't fit, but instead just do the work to be, to continue to be who and how they are, right?
Yes, 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 and yes. It is so true. It is so true. Much of my personal motivation, and I know the same is true for my partner, my husband, we both know how we lived and how we came through and the struggles that we were presented, having been placed in boxes of whatever kind, whether they be belief, faith boxes or scholastic, achievements boxes, the way to learn, a certain way to look. I mean, all of those things and the struggle of as you said, trying to separate or stand away from those things. And the impetus for that being just feeling like you just don't fit. It's this miserable thing where you're just like, this is not working. And so it propels you into figuring out what does work. And when you bring little people into the picture and you observe that they are in their own right, each embarking on a journey, you want them to not have that bogged down weight, so giving them freedom to figure it out instead of imposing on them certain beliefs and certain standards and ways of doing. So,
absolutely. And that's particularly hard for Black folks. We come from a space where we've never been allowed to be free. Freedom and allowance shouldn't even be in the same sentence, but we've never been allowed to be free. And so the most vulnerable among us being our children, what many of us have developed, which I think is actually a very natural protective space, is that because of those reasons that we've never been free or safe, we've put this safeguard around our children that say, look, we know that education is the way to win the game. So my job is to be as strict as I can, as hard as I can, because if I'm not hard on you, if I'm not hard enough on you, then the system is going to, chew you up and spit you out. And so we've been so protective that we are boxing our children in, putting them down these paths in the name of love and in the name of liberation. But the paths end up being just other forms of oppression, right? Like using the same oppressive tactics to try to raise these people. So I know that you and your husband are very mindful of this, like Chris and I am. And I want to talk a little bit about that, Yolonda. How do you, as a Black woman, as someone who's very conscious in a partnership with a very conscious person, how do you navigate the space of not protecting your children by making sure that they fit in, as opposed to doing it the way you do it now, which is giving them the space to be themselves?
So it's just been this commitment, this decision, and then this commitment to and always be ever mindful of ourselves, as we spoke to earlier, because we are, an element of the curriculum that our children are matriculating through. So, their lives with us as their parents, they're looking to us. And so how free are we? How much do we, try to come in line with one thing or another thing versus trying to figure out who we are as individuals, each of us. And then they see us, they find us reading books and they hear us in conversation and they hear what music we have in our space and they hear and see what we're watching on the television and, how we're moving through. And we own businesses. So being like that, when they're in spaces with us together and we're there at one of our business spaces and things are happening there, we always remind them, whose space is this? How are you conducting yourself here? What do you want to represent? And so just opening up conversation and perspective so that they can kind of look and see what's happening as they're moving through the world and just, raising their own awareness. So asking them a lot of questions. That's what we do. We end up asking a lot and, provoking thought in each of them. And, even down to our 4-year-olds, we ask them questions and have always been engaging with them conversationally so that, we're just opening up the space for them to offer their thoughts to their own selves.
Yes.
To us too. Yeah.
And that's such a big form of liberatory living, I think, is just questioning, and not questioning from the space of bringing the person into doubt, but it's more about questioning to bring the person into awareness so that we know that we have a choice in so many things. In a lot of spaces, we don't recognize choice. We don't recognize choice. And I think a lot of that is by design. It's like, oh, well, that might hurt, or that one doesn't feel certain. So really, you only have this one thing. But that's not true. And I think that's one of the things that's so important for Chris and me, why school couldn't work in that space, is because it limits choice. And it says that some things are wrong and some things are right before you, the child, the person, the student, the learner, has the opportunity to process it and to make that decision with the benefit of your own lens.
Right. That's right. It's so funny. I feel like I'm talking to myself. It's just, I don't know what else to say because it's all being said. It is so true. We have been very deliberate about absolutely making sure that our children have space to figure it out on their own. And, we started with our first child and it's just filtered down to our last, but they never had really an opportunity to go in to have that experience of having someone put, a certain way of learning onto them.
Yeah.
And just watch them thrive in the openness and in the space. And I think that has taught us and shown us, oh my gosh, like intuitively and innately, they have so much, like they are already knowing beings. Like they are. So when we give them space, they have flourished. And I think that watching that happen continues to affirm and reaffirm to us that it's working.
Absolutely.
When there are doubts, just have a conversation with them or just observe them for a little bit. And you're like, oh my goodness. Not only are they getting it, but they're like off in their own thing, like doing some other stuff.
Exactly.
So, I think you can probably hear them in the background.
I can. I can, which is just fine, because that's one of the other things. We need to make more room for reality. When we're doing these podcasts and these different things, we try to stage, and I'm not with that at all. As long as you can hear the conversation, I think it's beautiful to have the realistic soundtrack.
Oh, yes.
I love the soundtrack of life. And I think that part is really important. So can you tell us the ages of your children?
My oldest is 9. My second born child is 7. And then I have 4-year-old twins. They are elementary and preschool ages.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And I'm going to make sure that on the show notes page that y'all have the links to their website, their Instagram account. I mean, because Yolonda takes some amazing, mesmerizing pictures. And then even some of the candid shots that you take are just, it just feels really familiar.
I hope that it does. I mean, it's real. It's our real life, I guess, it's happening. And that is really the purpose and intent. Yes. Is to just share that.
Yeah, which is wonderful, which I think is, so I know you have a site, thereallifejoneses.com. So that really is about sharing these real stories. So the same things that we see on Instagram, you're going to go into a little bit more detail. Tell us about that project. What gap does this fill, and what will we get from the space?
So the point of the Real Life Joneses, the website and the blog site, is to do exactly what you said, is basically to elaborate on a lot of the things that we end up displaying and demonstrating on social media. People ask a lot of questions. People ask a whole lot of questions. And so we've just taken the time to answer some of those questions. We're calling it the Real Life Joneses because I think that most of us have this general idea, or you've heard the idiom, keeping up with the Joneses, or so-and-so is trying to keep up with the Joneses. And the Joneses end up being this like abstract idea of perfection. And we just had become uncomfortable with some of the, like in social media, you know, people will be like hashtag goals and hashtag I want this family and hashtag this is what I want my life to be like. And we no, wait, like you have to understand that we are real people. Like these are the things that we're going through. We're dealing with depression. We're dealing with anxiety. We're dealing with doubt. We're dealing with ups and downs. Like you see this very beautiful family with these beautiful children and this couple who appear to be so in love, and that we are, and that is not without struggle and without turmoil. And so we just want to go deep and have people see that these are the things that you may encounter as you're on your way to these things. If this is in fact the path that you want, you may encounter having to endure betrayal in your relationship and having to figure out, do you want to stay in the relationship or do you want to leave the relationship? And who are you as a person anyway? What is your makeup? What has brought you to this? How was this part of your story? You know, dealing with postpartum depression after having children, all these things that are like stuff that you don't really talk about outside the house, but everyone is dealing with to some degree in some way, maybe not in exactly the same way, but I think we just feel like it's really important for people to know that they're not by themselves. If you want to engage with us or you want to look to us at all, please look to us with, you know, a very true lens, a real lens.
Very, very excited about that. Oh my gosh. And we need so much more of that. There's so much room because there's such a huge gap, particularly for Black and Latinx folks, to show the diversity that exists in our space and also the sameness, right? It's like the humanity and the uniqueness all in one space. And there's so much room for that. We need so much more of those stories. And I love that you're willing to live out loud in that sense, you know, and I know that can be a very tricky thing. Real quick, a lot of you have seen online, mostly through Facebook, that I am wrapping up. I'm actually in week 9 right now of Raising Free People workshop. In addition to the POC in SDE, People of Color in Self-Directed Education hashtag, I've been sharing things under the Raising Free People hashtag. And last year, was that last year or this year? Dang, what month is this? Anyway, recently, I did a couple of free webinars around this work of raising free people. And I will definitely be doing another one, maybe 2 this summer. So the show notes page is also going to have a link for that where you can sign up for the free webinar. And I'm also going to be doing some more courses. I'm not going to do another workshop version of it. That will be live for the rest of this year if I do it. But I do have some coming up, including one called Parenting Patois around developing your own mother tongue as a parent, right? Because so much of parenting is based on either how we were parented or our reactions to society's views on how we should parent or how children should be, which leaves us very little room to really develop a way of parenting that matches who we are and who we want to contribute to the world. So going to be diving deep into that. Just wanted to let you know that because a lot of you have messaged me about the webinars. Yes. I will absolutely be doing another free one. And I will be inviting you to join a couple of courses that I will have around liberatory parenting, including the Parenting Patois one and a couple other ones that I have brewing. So akilasrichards.com/40 is this episode's show notes page, and the links for the webinar will also be there. All right, let's get back to Yolonda. So we were talking about why it's so important and how there's so much space right now to just live out loud from a very honest space, not from the showboat reality TV space, and then also not from the perfectionist, you know, we got it all together space, but just reality. And especially because we are also very diverse, but people have these ideas and we have these own ideas about what we can or can't be. Those same boxes you were talking about, in large part because we don't see a lot of the variety. So it's so great. I love that you and yours are willing to do this out loud so we can see all of the pieces of it. Because for you, as you know, as you said, as a creative, you sing, beautifully. Oh my gosh, goosebumps, entrepreneurship, that component. There's so much of it. And so why is it important for you to show that reality right now, for you and your partner? Why is this coming up now, you think?
I think that before we went very public with this one particular element of our story, which is surviving like infidelity within our marriage, there were other elements and that element as well, that we ended up in spaces where people were literally coming to our door with their own stories. Mm-hmm. And we found that in our being thankful and being open and being honest and also not being judgmental, that people were getting free.
Yes.
Like, people could address their own stuff and they felt safe to do it. Progress. It was like healing work for us, because now we're sharing, and now sharing other people were getting free. So we were like, we have to talk more about this. Like we have to broaden this conversation so that as a people, as a collective, as humans, we can all progress towards healing in all the ways that needs to manifest. So, yeah.
Oh, man, I love that. Thank you very much for that. And we absolutely need those reality checks. I remember when Chris and I did an episode called Love and Unschooling, in part as a response to the constant questions about how we do it. This idea that we shouldn't be able to get along because we work together and the girls are home and all of these things. And so it's to really address a lot of these, well, how, like from a very realistic space. And it's so important that we have those conversations so people can have practical examples, not lofty examples, but really practical examples, and to not feel alone as well.
That's right. I mean, that's right. I think that we're all just trying to get through here. And so being able to engage real time with people and to really ask questions and to be a safe place for people when they come with their own vulnerabilities, I think that, there's something really powerful in that. Yeah. That I've experienced personally and witnessed also. So, yeah.
Yes. And then, of course, it's so important that we extend that healing work, that freedom, the results of that into our relationships and our partnerships with children, because there's a lot of ways that we get free, but then the fear around who we're raising and who they may or may not become, that kind of blocks us off from realizing the ways that our children don't get to be free because of us. And so I love that. I know that you started out in a homeschooling space, but now you embrace something that is a lot more eclectic than that. So can you give us a little bit of insight, Yolonda, into, I know your kids are various ages and you use terms like elementary school age and that sort of thing. So there is a structured component, but then there's also a lot of freedom in terms of them choosing their interest and you guys kind of following their lead on that. So can we talk a little bit about how that looks in your household, the educational support structure?
Sure, absolutely. When we started out, the only term I knew was school. So that is like the idea that we started with. And so I went to sit at coffee with the homeschoolers that I knew, the official sort of like homeschool people, moms and the dads. And the context that I became initiated into the whole idea was within a very conservative, very Christian, and also very white space. Like it was that's where we first came into the whole idea. I felt a calling towards protecting like my children in the sense that I wasn't ready to send my oldest child into school when she was, 4, turning like 4, and it was time to sign her up for things. I was just feeling a lot of hesitancy and was like, I don't know if I want to do that. Like, I don't know if I have to. Who says I have to do that? So I think we're gonna move forward with that whole idea of homeschooling. My husband and I had talked about it before we had kids, but it was a very abstract idea at that point. It wasn't something that we thought we had decided to move into yet. So it wasn't until she was born and the time came that she was getting ready to go to school that we said we're going to do this. And so we started out in that space. And so much of what I initially learned was, attending conferences and having coffee chats with white moms to white children and to adoptive African children. Yep. And they were conservative Christian homeschoolers. And then in evolving personally and my own personal beliefs, my husband's personal beliefs, faith beliefs, and also just watching how it was playing out with the children. It just wasn't fitting. It just did not fit. It didn't feel relevant in any way. Because, and again, I'll go back a little bit. We bought like the shrink wrapped curriculum. We bought a couple different kinds of things to try to see if we could walk it through, because, that's what I understood the way to be.
Yeah.
The best way to do it. And it just didn't work. The children weren't interested. They were like looking and exploring things. And so we just had to take a step back and say, what is this? Firstly, what's happening? And secondly, how do we reconfigure it so that it fits better with their interests?
Mm-hmm.
And then I found out I was pregnant with twins, and I got really sick. I was on bed rest. And so whatever plan the structure, all of that stuff, like all of it just got tossed out the window, because there was not, like, we just couldn't do it. Practically, we couldn't do it. And then theoretically, it just didn't suit us anymore.
Yeah.
And so there was this sort of, I call it a cosmic, like, revelatory space for me to literally, like, quite literally be stuck in my bed and watching my children, because we actually had to move in with my parents for a time because I was so sick.
Wow.
And I was watching the children learn on their own, in their own time, in their own space, in their own way. And it was completely different from the initial idea that I had about how they needed to learn and how they were supposed to learn. And as I was growing my sons in my womb, I was watching my daughters develop their own interest in certain kinds of books, certain types of toys, certain things on television, certain behaviors I was watching come out, certain interests. And so I just had the time. I was forced to take the time to sit still and watch them. And then from that space, I began to understand and really be astonished, because I was feeling really low, like, oh my God, I'm not able to devote this time every day the way that I intended to do it, in the way that I intended to do it. Mm-hmm. Are they learning anything? Because I'm not teaching them. I'm not able to teach them. But then it was like, hey, look, they are learning on their own. They are acquiring language. They are learning to navigate like difficult circumstances. They are, in conversation and in the living. Look at how much they're learning. And that really was an opportunity in those months, in those gestational months when I was, on bed rest for almost the entire pregnancy with my twin boys. I was just watching my girls. And when the boys were born, in came all of these other logistics. Now you're navigating life with these surprise twin babies. So it's crazy and it's chaotic and, it's just a mess. You're not in your own space. And we just all had to learn to be flexible. And in that, I really came to consciousness about mindfully engaging with the children, finding lessons in everything. Like, here are the boys. This is what's happening in mommy's womb. This is what's happening when they're born. This is what's happening when they need to eat. What is happening with you? Oh, I'm very interested in what you're interested in right now. Show me what that is. Show me that toy. Read that book to me. And so engaging life, like real life happenings, they're attending the doctor's visits with us and they're asking questions. And so just finding that there are so many opportunities for proper learning beyond that hour, that window, 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, just in the spring and in the fall. Like, there's so much happening. There's so much science. Yes. There's so much math. One of the children's books, the first children's book that we'll read soon is called Fractions in the Lemonade. And that was, I remember when I was teaching my children math, because we were making lemonade at home. Like, we were making homemade lemonade and we were cutting the lemons and we were measuring things out, and they were very young at the time, but they were learning fractions and they were learning practical math and they were reading the recipes, and it was not the plan. That's the thing that has been the most fascinating to me. It's just been like, just pay attention to what's happening. There are so many lessons in just doing life together and being engaged with your children, and not, just having them be seen and not heard. Yes. Or having them be in the space and you're not talking to them.
Absolutely.
If you just talk to them, there's so much there. So yeah.
Very much so. That's the case.
Yes.
And that's a common, very common set of realizations among homeschoolers and then folks who transition even into other spaces like unschooling, because you go from the space of panicking because we understand teaching and learning as something that's transmitted from one person to another or from one resource to another. But then after a while, especially with observation, we start to see that learning is just a part of the sphere. You know, every cell, every movement, every atom, like all of those things are oriented toward curiosity and exploration and understanding and a drive to understand. That's not something that just happens as you become an adult or as you get a degree or whatever the fuck. Like, that's just human. That's human nature. And there are things that stop that from happening. But when that's supported and facilitated, you actually take that and you go far beyond any box or anything that you could possibly plan.
Yes, indeed, because it is innate. I mean, I have not met a child, like even children who are in the school system, when they're off by themselves, the ones that I've encountered, and I've met a lot of kids because people think, that's a whole other thing. People think I'm a kid person. And I'm really not. I don't have like this, like very, like, I'm not like, I don't have this weird patience gene, this mutation that makes me more patient and more like, I'm not that person. But I am absolutely fascinated with children, just when I'm able to talk to them and just the level of thought and cognitive awareness and the questions that they ask. And it all just seems to be born in until someone tries to put the box there and program them. It's like you are deprogramming them from what is already there and what will already carry them. Yeah. So recently I had this conversation with my dad about my oldest daughter. She has been involved in NSB, the NSB Junior chapter. She was invited to participate recently, and she's 9, and the children in this chapter are like 12 and 13. And so one of the individuals in this organization keep referring to her as a genius. And I'm just like, I look at her, and of course my child she's very intelligent, and she may, in fact, I don't know, maybe she is a genius. I don't know that, but I don't observe her having any sort of difference in her intellectual ability than any of my other children or other children that I have met just in everyday sort of day-to-day stuff. And so what feels true to me is that the children that we are encountering in these other spaces haven't been able to, like, they have not been able to fully shine, not because they don't have the light, but because it's kind of been hidden or boxed in one way or another. Yes. So these children are all very brilliant.
Exactly,
they all have
Yolanda.
ability. Just find what interests them. What are they interested in doing? What turns them on? Like, what makes them shine? What makes them light up? Let them go for that thing.
Right.
And when you do, that is when you'll see them in all their glory.
Absolutely.
That's what I've observed.
And I mean, as usual, it's, you're going to keep saying it sounds like you're listening to yourself. I'm going to keep saying the same thing too, because that's been very much the observation that I've had. I remember when Marley is our oldest and then Sage, youngest, the only other one. But when Marley started school and then they started testing her and then they started testing Sage and then they were calling them gifted and talented and all of these different things. And exactly the same thing you said, Yolanda. And people were thinking that I was being modest or that I didn't know how to take a compliment or whatever. I'm like, nah, it ain't got shit to do with any of that. I'm not saying that she's not amazing. I'm obviously not saying she's not amazing. But what I am saying is that I think that it's just that most of these other children, people assume how much they can do instead of giving them the space to just do what they can do and then building support around that. Like, that's one thing. Even when the girls were in school, even before they went to school, we never did anything because the girls, they were in school for some time before we were like, oh shit, hell nah, and moved out of there. But while they were in there, a lot of what we noticed was questions, like asking questions. It seemed like people weren't comfortable with their children asking questions, whereas we fully encouraged that. We liked it when they were like, yeah, but how come this? And they were insistent about it. We never assumed that because the book said for ages 4 to 6 that we should pick that book, we would have them pick the book. And sometimes it would say 10th to 12th grade, but we didn't care. They liked it because of the colors or a particular word or whatever. And that's what we used. So by the time the girls were in school, they could read, they could write, they could do all of these things because we really just did it based on their own interests. And then we realized how school interrupted that. So after like 2.5 years of that, we're like, okay, never mind. Let's just go back to what we were doing before. But by then we had to do so much deschooling that it took us another couple of years maybe about a year before we transitioned again from homeschooling to full on self-directed, let us know what you need, we're here to support type deal.
Yes. Oh my God. It's so true. And I want to go back to what you said about like people not knowing how to take the children being inquisitive.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely had that experience as well, especially with my oldest two children. Before people understood what we were doing, before people got to know them, it was like, so-and-so may think that they're a little bit smart-mouthed, or they're like, but they're, and then they would say, but they're not smart-mouthed. It's something else. Like it's so really, there was no word for people to like define inquisitive. Like they're inquisitive, they're asking questions, they're not being disrespectful. And I think that people could read that, but they didn't know how to take it. They were like, oh my God, they're asking questions, I don't know what to call it.
Isn't that like Twilight Zone crazy? Right?
Yes, it's weird. So yeah, there was definitely like, it's okay, and teaching them, making sure that they understood, the children themselves. I also want them to know that they don't have to dumb themselves down for people.
Yes.
But I want them to be aware that everybody doesn't know how to receive you, and that will be okay. So just be aware, because people will make comments to you that will make you feel like you need to change the way you are. And so having those early conversations and continuing them has been part of how we have been protecting the freedom, protecting the space, just making sure they're aware. Everybody is not going to be the most comfortable with the fact that you're free.
Yes.
That's going to make people uncomfortable.
And what an important life
teaching
skill.
them what it looks like. Yes. Yeah. So those conversations are so interesting, because it really is like, when you just take your time and tune in, these little people say some of the darndest things. And you're just like, whoa, like I didn't know you thinking like that, or you were on that wavelength. And so just to be still and receive and hear and listen really just does that takes you far with children.
That is a big part of active parenting that I think we don't recognize as active parenting enough. That stillness, that willingness to observe. We look at observation as such a passive thing, but it really isn't, especially when you're talking about relationships. And what isn't a relationship? Everything is relational, everything. And so when we apply that specifically to parenting and look at the ways that we can shut up, and listen and observe and not assume, we learn so much about their own capacity, and also about our baggage as well, and not from a negative self-judging space, but realizing how a lot of the things that we do in the name of responsible parenting is more about like control or fear, and about the things that we just haven't, we try to fill a gap when really there's no gap. It's really just to observe and see how you can support. To me, everything you're saying points very much towards that. And I'm really happy that we're willing and able to share this perspective, because so many of us feel this way, but we don't have people that we can talk to about it and articulate it and be okay with it even.
That's right. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons also, to reflect back to you. I was so happy to find that you were trying to facilitate the space for the conversations to be had, and for people to know that this is okay. And this is in fact necessary for our collective sort of progression and evolution into who we are truly. Like, it's adding all the color back in, like all of the depth, all of the exploration, this is all necessary. And so for those of us who are able and courageous enough, and, and also, and not that it's like easy, and that you don't have times where you're just like, I don't even like, was I doing like this? So you come into self-doubt at times, especially when you get around people who are like, have your children taken this test yet? And are they ready for this yet? And around the spaces where everyone's doing it in the way that they've been programmed to do it, it can make you question yourself. So when you have space where people are doing it, and maybe someone else is at a strong point while you're at a weak point, the person who is there with the strength can say to you, stay the course, sis. Like it really will be okay. Someone who's further down the road, or someone can affirm to you, that if it's not working, try to see maybe there's some way to reconfigure. And then there it happens in seasons. There will be a time when you're the strong one and you can turn around and say to the person behind you, it's going to be okay, bro. Like, it's all right. Just stay the course. And it becomes this symbiotic sort of relationship, which is community, and it's necessary. So the fact that you're facilitating that is really important.
Thank you for that. I feel the resonance in the dialogue, and I know the type of questions that I get all the time, and you probably get them all the time too, via emails and direct messages, and, you know, just a sense of that same community component that you're talking about that is so lacking for us. And also the recognition that this liberatory way of approaching parenting and marriage and being and creative expression and entrepreneurship, all of these things, these are very necessary parts of our liberation as people of color, like very necessary.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, in America, and I don't know because you are more traveled than I am right now, but I know that being in America is such a complicated thing. Just being Black in America is so complicated. There's so many layers to it. And so, yeah, like being able to converse about even just to speak up and say that this is complicated.
Yes.
And you have, you know, people from all different groups, Black folks and white folks and all other kind of colors in between on the spectrum coming up to you and asking questions about how to think about this or how do you think about that and how are you navigating this? And because people are seeing what's happening in the world and what has been happening and trying to process it. And for some reason, I just feel like there's, you know, there's this awakening or more of an awareness, like people, and it might just be Trump. It may just be 45.
Right. Whatever it takes. Right.
Whatever it is. I don't know. But people are asking many, many, many more questions. And people feel awkward and afraid and scared to have the conversations. I just feel like it's okay to fumble. I make sure people know that. I think that when I had my twins and I was being very vocal in my social media spaces about what I was feeling, like the angst, the pain, the like knot in my stomach, like I have these boys and I don't know why I wasn't as aware of it yet with my daughters. But when I had two boys that I was staring down in the face and looking at them and seeing my children and then looking out into society and seeing how children like them are being treated and young that they would grow into, it made me sick. Like I literally got sick and I started to write about it a lot. And then I would get people coming into my inboxes and people engaging like publicly in the threads and just talking about how they had never seen it or never thought about it that deep or occurred to them. And it was just like, yo, no, for real. Like I'm sick behind this.
Yes.
This is really bothering me and I don't know what to do about it. And so I became, I was very mean. I was aggressive. And that was exhausting. And I began to think, okay, I have to figure out a balance. And I realized that I have to stay soft, not soft like passive, but soft enough to receive and engage in conversation with people and understand. I could sense that there was this level of awkwardness with people and fear and also the desire to want to help and do something to change it, whatever the ethnicity of these people who are sending me messages of all different races. These people want to help. They want to figure out what to do. They want to know how to change it. How can I protect my child? How can I help my child protect your child? How can we help this thing? And they were fumbling over the terms to use and what to say and what not to say, but you could hear in all of it the desire to want it to change. And so, like figuring out that for me, I know that some people are just, unwilling to go into those conversations, but for me, I felt it necessary because it feels like the progress into the sort of world that I want my children to grow up in, my sons and my daughters.
And for them to be a part of creating as well, because there's the thing again that I'm so grateful that we get to express, all of the people who have lent their time on the podcast, including you, that we get to express that not only are we actively participating in as best we can the type of world that we want our children to live in and for ourselves to live in later on, but also we want to help raise people who facilitate that, who are a part of that, who are connected to community and self and consciousness and humanity and identity and all of these different things that we've separated them like subjects, math, English, black, white, all of these different things. and we compare and we compete our way out of our own humanity. So of course we're nervous about fumbling around the words or saying the wrong thing or the right thing. And this is why I say a lot to white folks who reach out to me and say, look, you got to be willing to be uncomfortable. That's the first thing right there, because we've had no choice but to be uncomfortable. It's combative whenever we speak up about ourselves. Now you need the practice being uncomfortable. And the more we see that you're not about protecting your opinion, but really looking to learn like we all are, then the more we can actually collectively raise free people, including ourselves, because this is not just about parenting. It really is about raising the world in a sense, in a different way, starting with that approach to, you know, what does oppression look like for me? What does liberty look like for me? Liberation, you know, how do I practice that in all of the things that make me me?
That's right. That's so right. I mean, all of it from the way that we parent to hearing because I feel like the children are the closest thing, like to whatever that other side is that they came from. Like they are untainted until they are entered, you know, until they enter more and more into the world. And I think about it even in terms of like dreaming and, you know, being able to have those, I don't know. I feel like children are just so much more sensitive. It's like birth and death. The closer you are to being in spaces where people are aging, having watched my grandmother's transition and being in the spaces where that was happening, it was like this awareness of the other side, and they seem to be more in tune as children and as elder people. And then when we're in the middle, we lose sight sometimes until we tune in. Yes. I mean, I think that being able to really hear the lessons from all the places, from the time the children enter the world and they're, you know, they're in the little years, and they have so much just the depth of wisdom and knowing and sensitivity and perception, and just to not mess with that too much.
Yeah, because that's the work, right? Like that is the work.
Right. Yeah. I mean, get some skills because they have to move through here as adults. They're moving into adulthood and they'll have to engage differently, but try not to mess with too much, like with that thing that's already there. Yeah. That's what happened to a lot of us. Like somebody did something to mess with that thing, and now we're trying to find our way back in all of these ways, and it manifests in our evolutions in faith and our evolutions in belief system and you know, how we do our work and how we network and, you know, how we do school. What do we need to go to college? Do we want to go to college? Is college a must thing? You know, did you do that? Oh yeah, I did that, but I don't know. It's so all of these questions and all of this unfolding. And I think, just paying attention to all the spaces and really understanding at the heart of it all is this journeying, this like progression of the soul through this lifetime. And you have different ages and stages at which it's happening. Yes. But just at the heart of it all, I think for me, and I think I believe personally that seems to be the most important thing, is just letting that part of you be.
I really couldn't agree more, because too, the more you do that for yourself, the easier it is to allow other people to do it and to meet people where they are. And again, not from the space of like, oh, I don't get it wrong and I don't beef when, you know, shit isn't perfect for me or whatever. Definitely not from that space, but being aware and being able to come back to yourself each time, which is why I think the intergenerational component of self-directed education, that's one of the things I love about it so much, that at any point, you know, my girls we can go to Florida and visit one grandma. Both of my grandmothers are still here, thankfully. So they know both of their great grandmothers, because we could go to where they are, you know, and have that experience with them. Their friends vary very much in ages. They have friends in their 20s, and then they have friends who are 9 and 8, and my girls are 13 and 11. But they don't look at it like that at all. They don't look at it by age. It's a curiosity-based thing. Oh, you're into this? That's cool. Yep. I've never heard of that, or I'm totally into that too. So they move, we get to watch them move about the planet with such a sense of confidence, you know, that they'll always be cared for, and not in a blind way. Because as you said, there's certain life skills that they need, and there's certain contexts that they might not have that we can kind of nudge them towards. But so much of the work is just backing up and letting the shit be what it is, because they come with their own full ecology, just like we all do. And, you know, we don't have to get in the way of that and play God. You know, that godness exists for all of us. So that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, it's just, I really feel like I'm like itching right now. I want to talk to you like so much more.
There's so much good. I mean, and I tell you, like when I know we're always like expressing all this love in social media, and it is really true. It really does feel life giving. Like I get goosebumps because it's like you have found a connection that is so much deeper than just there's another Black sister over there. No, there's a certain knowing, a certain level of knowing, and when you feel a connectivity there, it feels like there's it's like your deepest being feels like there's a kindredness, and that feels good.
Totally. So that's my way of being like, we're gonna have to figure out a better Skype thing or work something else, and I know we both have so many wonderful things going on, but I just want to say thank you, once again, because I'm really grateful for what you're doing, not just for me, because there are definitely things that you're clearly doing just for me. but also for all of us. Let me not be selfish. For all of us, because your willingness to live out loud and to offer, in a sense, like the space, the sacred space that is your family, your children, your partner, all of these things, to offer that sacredness to us as a means of learning and exploring and being. That's not something that I take lightly, because I know what it is like to offer that as well. And I recognize it, and I know that it's going to be so much more powerful. It already is. But as your work unfolds into this brand beautifully, organically, I know and see already that it's going to have such a broad impact. And I'm really grateful for your willingness to do that.
I take that and I'm taking it right to my heart, giving thanks for that. Thank you for that affirmation. And I appreciate it. I look forward to hearing and sharing and everything else that you do that I share. I would love to share some more.
Thank you. Ditto.
Tweet your feedback using the hashtag POC_in_SDE, as in people of color in self-directed education.
Thanks for listening to Farrah the Free Child podcast. Like the show? Then show your love or give your feedback at akilasrichards.com.